This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. We are in Canada for this episode, Montreal to be exact. My first time in the city of Montreal, and bringing me here to the city, there's a vibrant brewing scene, and one that we've been paying attention to. Maybe if I go way back, it goes back to my early days in craft beer back in the 1990s when, as we were seeking out when I was a young, early 20s something, beer drinker in Florida. One of the best craft beers, most interesting craft beers that we could get came from a place that I drove past this afternoon as I was driving up here, Unibrew. And, and so this idea of craft beer here in Quebec, has always been something that I've been intrigued by. And of course, in the recent years, the brewing scene here in Quebec has absolutely exploded. Joining me for this episode is Derrick Robertson from BreWskey. Welcome to the podcast, Derrick.
Thank you very much.
Derrick's been sending beers our way to the magazine. If you're a magazine reader, you've probably seen those reviews. You probably saw their Stout Dandy last year in our Beers of the Year and our best 20 beers, editor's picks for their best 20 beers of 2024. Congratulations on that, Derrick.
Thank you again.
Of course, the IPAs that you send our way regularly show up in the magazine, and you make some incredibly expressive beers. While I was just down in Vermont earlier this week, I heard brewers in Vermont refer to the term Quebec-style IPA. And the natural magazine editor in me always latches on to that kind of thing. So naturally, what do you in Vermont define as Quebec-style IPA? We're going to answer that question over the course of this podcast. Of course, the IPAs that you send our way, whether they've been in the reviewed in the magazine or just been ones that I have tasted and drunk myself, like the New Zealand Red and Gold series that you sent our way, some really truly phenomenal beers. Been incredibly impressed with with that kind of space. And when I get here, again talking to brewers in this area, even one earlier today, they're like, Derrick, he loves experimentation. He'll have his brewers just constantly experimenting and bringing, doing these tests and bringing the results of those. And as I tour this, from the production brewery or brewpub, really, it's not this is a brewpub shoehorned into a historic building, and calling it a production brewery is probably not going to do it a service. But, in this space, you also have a small 2-barrel pilot system. You're engaged in all sorts of projects. We tasted everything from Fonio Lager earlier today, to all 6 pounds per barrel, right? Phantasm sour beer that I swear to God tasted like it had passion fruit in it. Would have been way cheaper to make it with passion fruit. But, anyway, let me just set the stage for everybody because the experimentation runs pretty deep here. I am excited to talk to you about that. I'm excited to talk to you about the way you build expressive IPA that also has balance and also sweetness and also more balance, finding it not just from bitterness, but from other kind of flavor components in those beers. I'm really excited to talk to you about some of those experimentation, some of these projects that you're working on. We tasted everything. Like we tasted a Czech dark lager brewed with 3470 that hit a fermentation temperature of 80 degrees and yet somehow it didn't have off flavors and tasted clean and nice. And anyway, you're doing some cool stuff here. We're going to try to touch on as many of those things as we can in the hour that we have. It may not be enough time, Derrick, but we're going to try. Before we do that, Justin Thomas, president of G&D Chillers, says everyone who works here at G&D shares a common goal to be on the forefront of innovation so we can solve problems for our customers. For a more sustainable approach to refrigeration, they've announced their latest innovation as part of the trailblazing Elite 90 line of propane chillers. The Elite 290 Micro Series line uses a natural refrigerant, features a more compact design with variable speed fans, and offers near zero global warming potential. The future of sustainable refrigeration is here. Learn more about G&D's Elite 290 line and visit gdchillers.com. And brewers, what if your yeast could do more than just ferment with Berkeley Yeast it can. They bioengineer ordinary strains and make them extraordinary, enhancing the flavors you want and eliminating the ones you don't. Now, in addition to competitive pricing, they're offering free overnight shipping on 5+ barrel pitches. Try it out. If you don't love it, they'll happily refund you. So why settle for ordinary when you can brew with better yeast? Visit berkeleyyeast.com to learn more and start brewing with science on your side. Also, as breweries expand beyond beer into other segments like mocktails and CBD beverages, Old Orchard is here to help. They can formulate custom blends featuring specialty ingredients. Whether trending flavor additions or nostalgic favorites, the next best thing is around the corner at Old Orchard. More information and free samples are waiting at oldorchard.com/brewer. That's oldorchard.com/brewer. So let's start off with some background. Tell me your background. Tell me the background on BreWskey. You are a co-owner, co-founder of this brewery. Your wife's also involved in it, and you have a business partner in this. And it's actually it's a kind of impressive complex here in Montreal with multiple spaces. You also all you're involved in a bakery that's also a part of this. You have the annex / smokehouse. You have the tap room. You have the pub. You've got 2 different brewing spaces. You have built this production space into a very old building that was certainly not designed for this kind of thing, but it's right here on the waterfront and a beautiful place and beautiful outdoor patios. Tell me the story, your own personal story and the story of BreWskey.
Yeah. So I started brewing beer when I was in university. It was just someday I was just at my dad's place and I found a book called just Joys of Homebrewing. I was like, oh, you could actually make beer. It was never something I even thought about making at that point. I made everything else, cooked a lot, built a lot. My dad's is a jeweler and a construction worker, so he did both.
A jeweler and a construction worker.
And like mechanics, just kind of fixed everything and knew and was super precise about absolutely everything. So I think that created some sort of just precision foundation. And I just started making beer in university because it was just a cheaper option than actually buying beer, and got super into it. And I think like everybody does 2 batches of beer and then suddenly it wants to open up a brewery. And like, I guess I'll work in engineering for a few years and I'll figure out how to make a brewery. And that was kind of always the point. And that's kind of what I ended up doing after graduation, went off. And then after a job or 2 in regular engineering, I then went and then did brewery design for about 8 years. And that was my major part of the job, just constructing new breweries. I worked in maintenance in one of the bigger breweries around here called McCausland, where I was running just the maintenance program and doing installs of their new canning lines, their deoxygenation method, like all their new machines. So I spent a lot of time just designing breweries for about 8 years of my career. And at that point, I was just trying to go, okay, I've now built enough breweries. Can I make my own? And one day my wife was just working she was working to try to figure out how to become a management, like learn how to do the management part of the restaurant part, because I wasn't going to be able to do that. And she was just working for many years there. And the bar where everybody went out to go to have drinks was a bar called Dublin's Pub. And that's where I met Guillaume, which is my other business partner. And we just kind of clicked over the years. We're just going, okay, let's do something. And then it took about 2 years of searching for a space, and we found something in Old Montreal, which was never really the point, because Montrealers don't usually go to this part of town. It's definitely a little more tourist focused. Exactly. It's super touristy. It's super like club heavy or nice restaurant heavy. So but after 2 years of searching, it just ended up being a space that made sense for us. It was 900 square feet. The rent made sense. It was a quick turn. So we were able to look at it and build something like, okay, we can't brew in this space. We'll never be able to brew in this space, but it'll allow us to start. So we started that in 2015. We're about at the 10-year mark right now. We're celebrating our anniversary in 2 weeks. So that's like the nice little cherry on top. It's been this long. But within that time, we were just contract brewing, and we got kind of lucky. After third beer, we found a contract brewery that was able to take our size of beer, or like the amount of beer that we wanted to make. And because of the size and the fact that we were only really selling in our spot, I needed something that was going to be small, and they were able to accommodate us fairly nicely. And it made it kind of easy for us for the first 3 years of having them just make good beer for us. I was taking over 3/4 of their volume at that point.
Oh, wow.
So it was almost as if it was my own little brewery. But then we got
the contract brewery becomes the brewery at that point. Sure.
But then we got lucky enough that the space right under us, which was an old textile museum, opened up, and we're like, okay, that makes sense. Let's just build the brewery, because we were full every night. We were not able to make the full every beer that we really wanted to make. So, and we needed a little bit more space, so it made sense for us to start building.
And should note that you also, building a brewery, indoor space in a heavily touristed area sounds like an incredibly expensive enterprise, but you also have outdoor patio seating that, in warmer months just gives you so much kind of expansive, power to put people.
Yeah. I guess that's something I didn't really mention, is that we are currently in what is the BreWskey market, which is probably one of the most iconic buildings in Montreal. It's the one that's featured on a lot of videos, it's always the one that kind of pops up. It's a building from the 1800s. So it's super old, and it's gone through a few fires. So the infrastructure is kind of recent in here, where it's in the 60s, they rebuilt the whole inside and kept the shell outside. And because of that, it's like 42 inches of concrete. The everything is hard. Everything is difficult. The walls are 4 feet of just stone. And like a lot of our limitations on building out the space was actually trying to get equipment into such an old building, and trying to get as much of the biggest equipment as we could into these old buildings. So it
called on all of your brewery engineer kind of background, trying to figure out how to build the actual production environment in this less than perfect, less than ideal kind of scenario.
I don't think if anybody didn't have the background I had would have had an easy time to build something in a space like this. They would have been able to, but it would have costed a fortune to hire people like me to try to figure out how to get the stuff in here. After that point, it was just running and trying to figure out how to make great beer again, just different beer, and just doing stuff that allowed, because back then when we just had the pub, we were brewing 1,000-liter batches for a 50-seater. So every batch kind of lasted a month and a half. It was more about having our beer on draft and less about experimentation at that point. It just became safe. And that's what when we created our own brewery, you're like, okay, I'm going to have this big 1,500-liter batch out. So 12, 13 barrel batch out. But I also wanted 2-barrel systems just so that we can do experimentations, try stuff out, and do things a little bit differently, where I wasn't able to do that anymore be on the other system, because it just meant I have this much beer I have to sell as draft. Now, okay, I can now do 200 liters and figure out something a little bit different and be a little bit more free with ideas than what I was able to do before.
And so how many seats are you at now between the pub, the tap room, the annex, everything else?
Indoor seating, we're probably about 240, 250. Outdoor seating, I think we're about 600.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So now it's a whole different story, where now you're making enough beer to, in the high point of summer, quench the thirst of 600 people. Like it's no small feat.
No, but it kind of just shifts production in a certain way, where during a major amount of the production ends up just swapping to easy drinking beers, lagers, whites, and a few of those things, where during the winter time, I'm selling maybe 100, 200 liters of lager a week. Switch it to the summertime, I'm selling 1,500 liters of lager a week. So
wow.
A lot of that just swaps to that other method. So it's not the IPA kind of stays standard. I take a layer, so maybe 200 liters difference of removing that from cans and put it to draft. And on the flip side, I'm just going to be in the wintertime, just add a little bit more cans. Our overall week to week production from summer to winter never changes. It just we offer more cans during the winter and we offer less cans during the summer, but we're always just running full tilt the whole time.
Interesting to see that kind of balance of the beer style kind of shift with the season, and then the packaging kind of, piece of that kind of fungible and move alongside as these kinds of things grow.
Yep.
I mean, it makes sense. A lot of people, it makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about some of the beers. Like, as you started BreWskey, naturally, you come from that engineering background, not unusual in the brewing world to make that kind of transition. But at the same time, when you really started, building a name for the beers that you made, there was definitely some style kind of considerations there. You all are definitely tuned into contemporary styles, everything from, those kind of flavored pastry stouts and smoothie sours to hazy IPA. You make a fair number of lagers, and that's not to say that, it's all of that. Like every brewery, you make beers for yourselves, you make beer for your customers, you do all of the things, and you want to do all of those things to the best of your, potential and ability. So I want to talk about some of that creative process. You started kind of mapping out what the BreWskey brand is going to be. Before you do that, both classic and contemporary Indie Hops Lorien was developed with crisp, low-gravity beer in mind. A nod to the past with an eye to the future, Lorien seamlessly combines traditional elements of European noble hops with an elegant twang of American modernity. Low alpha and squeaky clean, Lorien provides a refined, smooth bitterness to any lager and delivers enticing flavors and aromas of lemon lime zest, fresh melon, wildflowers, sweet hay, and cinnamon spice. Refreshing the past for a present time, Lorien's classic profile and distinct finish are conducive to celebration and appetite and evoke feelings of grassy meadow near a cold mountain stream. Summer is near and Lorien awaits. Learn more about Lorien and the rest of Indie's varieties at www.indiehops.com. Indie Hops, life is short. Let's make it flavorful. And are you a craft brewery looking to elevate your branding? Steel Chill Cups are the perfect promotional tool, crafted from 100% recyclable steel and proudly made in the USA. These 16-ounce cups come in vibrant red, blue, green, and gray. Designed to keep beverages cold and frosty to the touch, they enhance the drinking experience at festivals, tastings, and tap rooms. Customizable branding options allow breweries to showcase logos and unique designs, boosting brand recognition. These stylish cups not only serve a practical purpose, but also become keepsakes for beer lovers. Discover how Steel Chill Cups can put your brand on every pour. Visit steelchillcups.com today. So let's talk about the creative process here. You're thinking about a beer program for BreWskey. There's lots of ways to go. And that process was probably iterative as well. How did you think about it creatively? What you guys were going to make, and how you're going to develop an identity for BreWskey, knowing that you have both local customers and a fairly significant kind of rotating tourist audience here as well.
I think it all starts with just the beer menu. Every single Monday, I kind of come in and I look up at the board and go, what's the hole? What's missing? What actually got consumed the most over that weekend? So that's where it's always kind of stressful for everybody that's around me, is that you ask me on a Friday what I'm going to be brewing Monday. I have no idea. I don't even know what I'm going to be brewing on Tuesday if it's Monday, because I'm always allowing that beer board and that client to kind of decide what I'm going to be brewing. So I look up at the board, go, okay, I look at the sales. We sold 300 liters of white. I guess we're brewing a white on Monday. And I just then define that recipe based across those things. I see there's a hole opens up on a fruited sour, and then, maybe I have to fill up that hole. Same thing happens with IPAs. I look up at the board, there's like Citra something, Citra this, there's 2 New Zealand something. So like, okay, maybe it just needs this other hop inside of it to create that variety, so that the client looks at the menu and then sees that there's not just this one kind of defined beer that's going across. I'd like to fill up those holes to try to look at the things going like, okay, there's going to be mosaic in this one. There's going to be Citra in this one. There's going to try to create that diversity of the menu as if I'm looking at a regular food menu, and I'm trying to create something that will make people want to look at the thing and go, I tried the Citra one already. I'm maybe going to try the mosaic. Because I am, like many of us, a very big, I'm a beer geek, in the sense of I like to try all these beers. I don't necessarily am able to follow the trends, but I also know that most of our clients are not. most of the people that are going to be coming through the doors are not going to be people that are necessarily coming to chase our beer. They're just coming through the door and they want to have a good beer experience. And I think that's the most important thing, that what we do here is just trying to look at the menu and make sure that we're touching everything. If we're able to, as like summer comes along and we're like chasing beers, we'll quickly fill up the board with IPA because that's what we produce a lot of. That's what we can a lot of. But then it goes, okay, now we have this much IPA. We need to now create the diversity so that people are able to come look and come here and have the whites, have the lagers, have the darks, have the peanut butter stouts, have kind of almost everything. And oftentimes, because those are the solo beer style, that kind of style on draft, they're often highly sold. So they go on draft really quickly and they disappear really quickly. And we're always chasing those kind of things. And so that's what
that one coconut stout sells well because it's the only coconut stout that you have on right there.
Exactly. If I look at my sales, I go, oh, IPA is not a great seller, but because I have 6 on draft. Sure, the white, the Vienna lager, even right now I have 3 blonde lagers on draft. That blonde lager as a singular brand is not the highest seller. If I'm looking at just one of those beers, right. I combine them, it now wins, but it's no longer my top seller. My top seller is the white because there's only one. So that's what a lot of the creativity kind of comes from, is just going, okay, how do I fill this void, this hole in this menu that is just always popping up, and that it gets created by the clients consuming that product or those kinds of products because that's what they wanted that period. And we see it's always different, where we'll have like different parts of the world coming, where like Americans are coming, then we're consuming a lot more IPAs and lagers. Then we'll have France people are coming, and then the red disappears a lot faster during those weeks. So different people from different parts of the world actually consuming different products, and it makes it really hard to gauge. That's why I have a hard time looking at like, what am I going to brew on a Monday, on a Friday, because who's going to be there that weekend? It's really tourism heavy here. So
sure, it depends on what. What the special event is and what might be bringing people in from wherever they're coming from. It's nice to have an international city like that. And I also love that white beer or witbier is such a big, consistent thing for you. It's, there are breweries in the United States that do well with that, obviously Allagash, but maybe not quite the same kind of powerful style as it is here. A little bit of that like residual unibrew effect there. The Blanche de Chambly and and some of that kind of character.
A lot of what's actually interesting in Quebec is a lot of our beer styles are defined about color. So you go in a lot of Quebec breweries or brew pubs, it's the blonde, the red, the black, the white. It's just color based. And that's how a lot of people in Quebec end up ordering beers. They come around, it's because our wit beer is fermented with London 3. It's nothing. It's just, I have it on hand and I like that profile.
Sure. Makes sense.
It's all about things. I end up making beers in the way that I would like those beers. So I don't like that overly phenolic or estery profile or the banana profile that you get from a lot of those ones. So I like having a cleaner ferment, and then what parts do I like from whites? One of our main ones is called Peppercut because it's lime zest and pink peppercorns, and it's just doing something that's like, those are the parts of the whites that I like. I like the orangey, I like the zesty. But I don't necessarily like the yeast profile. So I take those parts out and I fermented it always with English yeast.
You just add some ingredients back in to give you some of those yeast components, but in a much more tightly focused kind of way.
Exactly.
Interesting. Well, tell me more about this, because I got to know about wit made with London Ale 3. Come on. It's like you just waved a red flag in front of the bull here. I got to ask about this.
It's literally just the fact of having to make a product that was highly demanded across
Sure.
And it was just the kind of thing that it was just, I developed a type of white that people that didn't actually like whites, people like me, really enjoyed. And
people that didn't like whites. Yeah. And so we should couch this in saying that you are not a Saison fan. You are not necessarily a classic wit fan that I guess,
No.
is it that kind of phenolic character that doesn't really jive with you from that, or as well as some of the, you tell me.
It's pretty much that I'm not a huge fan of the Belgian fermentation styles. I like the clean ferments. I don't mind when banana and a few of those clove things express themselves in higher gravity beers, but I don't necessarily like them in lower gravity beers. And so I kind of went, okay, as I said, I kind of developed a style of wit of what do I like about it. I mean, a lot of the whites that we have around here come with an orange on top of it. Okay, so orange is the big factor of making these beers good. I didn't want to necessarily do orange. Lime zest seemed to make a lot more sense. I regretted that choice when I would spend hours hand zesting limes. Just me and my wife would just spend hours taking 2 cases of lime and zesting in front of movies just continuously. It's like what makes sense as a homebrew does not necessarily make sense on the commercial scale. So we would zest all these things, and it was just the rare times I would run bar, I'd talk to people, go, what do you like? Like, we don't like whites. Try this white. And I would serve it to them and they would love it. And it was just because it was something that was a little bit out of the ordinary for them, but it would still hit the same things that a lot of people that do like the whites kind of liked, which was just something that had, I guess, a lot of the times the orange parts or the zesty, the citrusy parts that were really important for the white component. And as long as you kind of hit those, that kind of made it okay.
And the soft texture to that, which also, kind of spans through into your IPA approach, is also important. Let's talk about some of on the white, what does the grain bill look like for that?
Kind of really typical, going for 50% wheat, 10% oats, malted oats, and then 40% Pilsner. So just kind of skewing it off that way.
Sure. Anything to the kind of process there? It's not, you've got a brewpub brew house here, and you're not necessarily getting into some crazy mash regimens on this. I now only do infusing mashing across everything. I have a steam jacketed mash tun, which allows me to do steps, and we used to do mash. But the types of systems that we have, we can't really properly agitate anything, so there's no homogenization that's possible. So we just completely stopped. Everything is now just single infusion, kind of simple. Transfer off to the kettle, boil, and just go on to the next step. So we've simplified those processes across the board. What is water like in that beer?
I've been slowly creeping chlorides up across everything. Just the minerality across all our beers has increased a bit. So chlorides, I'm probably hitting something almost New Englandy, like 150, with sulfates being about 80 on that one. The general totals, like minerality of the beer, is a little bit higher, but just kind of allows us to have something that just, if you're having one of our New Englands, then you go to the white, you're not overly shocked by a difference in the water profile at that point.
Sure. Now, are you building up, or have you processed water as it comes in here?
Water is actually pretty good in Montreal. It's cool, because all their water really comes from the St. Lawrence River. So it's all pretty much fresh water, and it's quite low in almost everything. So it's almost Pilsen style, a little bit higher, like a little bit more hardness, a little bit more, but it's still quite low. So we're able to build across that water. I don't need reverse osmosis. I don't need any of that. So we're able to almost build everything from there.
You're not on a well water that's
no.
Yeah. So then let's keep moving forward on this wit. I'm curious, what does that kind of hot side process look like in terms of hopping and boil?
I've shifted across a lot of different things. Now it's just hitting it with a bitterness charge of about 8 IBUs, and then we whirlpool with fresh zest. Low contact time, maybe about 5 minutes to pull it out. So we put everything in infusion bags. just because it feels after 5 minutes we get the maximum amount of extraction and we can pull it out without extracting any pith. So it's just like our kind of quickness. And same thing, we do the same thing with coriander, hit it with about 1 to 1.5 grams per liter of coriander. Same thing in bags, we get to pull them out. So it just makes it easier. And we'll whirlpool. I was doing Motueka.
You're zest pooling there.
Zest pooling, exactly. Also, we
should copyright that right now.
We zest hop also, so dry zesting really. So on that hot side, that's what we kind of do. We pull them out, we transfer it to fermenter when we finish fermentation. Everything that we do here after fermentation, we drop down to 16 for diacetyl rest. And then we drop everything to 13 to do any type of infusion at that point. So we'll throw in zests and then we'll rouse them for a day or two. Pretty much do the same process of a dry hop, really. And after that zesting point, we drop everything out and we transfer it to the bright tank.
So this London Ale 3 fermentation just kind of proceeds the same way that your hazy IPA fermentations do.
Yeah, pretty much.
You're getting the similar kind of, haze stability from that. And, any specific hops that figure into, this kind of wit piece, or you're not relying on them for flavor or for haze? No,
not really. On other beers, yes, but this one, the dry hopping is kind of out of the question on the time frame, because we end up kind of, these beers are 7 to 8 days to service. So grain to glass, really, because being a brew pub, we finish fermentation.
8 days.
Yeah. So we 4 days fermented out, 4 days soft crash, 2 days remove yeast, throw in our zest, rouse next day, cold crash, transfer to serving, and pretty much being served right from that point. And so there's no real time for dry hopping, and it's being served quick enough that the haze usually doesn't drop out. The only difference that we do is in wintertime, we know the flow rate's a little bit less. So often the whites will be two barrel batches instead, so that they kind of can keep that haze going. So those will be kegged off instead of being put into tanks, because during the winter times, I'm probably selling 50 to 60 liters of white. So our batches would take too long to go through.
Sure.
So at that point, anything will clear out in the cold room. So it makes more sense for us to keep those fresh and keep them rolling. Plus, it gives us the chance to kind of experiment, change, go to raw wheat, go to a malted wheat. Kind of, is flake doing anything good? We're trying to see if there's something that we can make that'll make the beer better. So we could just do a little bit more rolls on those.
And you keep changing those parameters even in this white beer that you're pretty confident with?
Pretty much everything.
Derrick, that's crazy, man. What are you doing? You're just making a lot of more work for your brewing staff.
I think they're just used to it now. I endlessly tinker with everything. From my recipe, I'm changing everything until I'm not allowed to. It's the whirlpools are determined 5 minutes before the whirlpool is happening. The dry hop is kind of decided when we need to print cans. It's always just because I'm always questioning. It's always, what is the better way to do this? What can we change to make this better? What's the last thing I had yesterday that should make me change everything I know tomorrow? It makes it hard on people. I know.
Oh my God. You sound like a nightmare if I hadn't already met your staff and seen how much they enjoy this and have bought into that kind of experimentation process and seem to be here for it, for themselves. And so otherwise I think you're driving everybody crazy here. Maybe you are, maybe they're just putting on a front for me. I don't know. But anyway, let's kind of, flip over and talk about IPA. Before we do that, breweries don't just need a point of sale system. They need a one-stop shop operating system. That's where Arrived comes in. Not only does Arrived offer a world-class POS built specifically for breweries, but they also provide Arrived brewery management, e-commerce, and more to help breweries scale and thrive. From taproom to distribution, Arrived gives breweries the tools to streamline operations and boost profits all in one powerful platform. Visit Arrived, ARRYVED.com to learn more. Also, this episode is sponsored by PackTech, delivering craft beer multi-packing you can trust. PackTech's handles are made from 100% recycled plastic and are fully recyclable, helping breweries close the loop and advance the circular economy. With a minimalist design, durable functionality you can rely on, and custom color matching, PackTech helps brands stand out while staying sustainable. Trusted by craft brewers nationwide, they offer a smarter, sustainable way to carry your beer. To learn more, visit packtech-opi.com. That's packtech-opi.com. Also, if you're launching a brewery or acquiring an existing one, consider our brewery workshop and new brewery accelerator, September 14th through 17th in Fort Collins, Colorado. Over 4 days, we engage in panel discussions, technical brewery tours, networking, and small working group sessions that help you better understand and prepare for the challenges of brewery operation. Tickets are on sale now. Visit breweryworkshop.com for more information and to secure your spot. All right, let's talk about hazy IPA. I think this is probably where, as you started sending beers our way, it made the most splash with me personally, and then obviously with our blind review panel and everything else that has kind of come from that. I find that there is, this kind of like plushness to your approach to IPA that feels rich and full, but also, and while sweet, nominally sweet, also feels balanced. And so even though they are big and unapologetically big, and you do make a fair number of very, double IPA, triple IPA, in this kind of hazy IPA space, everything at its core has this kind of softness and roundness, and so even when you're using hops that have a kind of, more pointed, edgy, mineral or petrochemical kind of, undertone to them, you still find this way to kind of add a smoothness and polish to those and give them this roundness that supports the overall whole. So let's start talking about hazy IPA and how you approach it conceptually as you're writing a recipe. When you're writing a new hazy IPA recipe, where do you start? Obviously, you've got your soft water. You're pumping chlorides up in that in order to, increase the softness. Where do you move from there?
I think that when we create these New England IPA recipes or these hazy IPA recipes, it's all about trying to figure out where do we want to be with them. And that's kind of the moving target at that point. How can we be super soft and super fruity, but then balance that off with a nice amount of haze, which haze has these astringencies that you're fighting with. Like the hazier the stuff, the more astringent they are. And we're trying to...
What and why?
Just like haze is a polyphenol, haze is a tannic. So we're always kind of like these super, super hazy beers. The only thing that ends up being super white and hazy is New Zealand stuff, in a level that allows us to have this really nice white haze, but not be burny. Where if we do something that's like Galaxy or anything from Australia, you get this same level of haze, but it's massively burny, massively pasty, and it's just something that you're going to be fighting with. So we kind of always try to figure out how can we make this product as hazy as possible, but also palatable. And that's, I think, the hardest thing that there is in our industry right now is trying to make something that's super white, super thick, super intense. That's going to be sustainably white because you're going to can it and after a month it's going to drop off a little bit, but still be massively fruity because what people want is like that kind of fruit punch thing. So our overall program for IPAs is really a program. If I look at a singular thing, like if I'm making a lager, it's that recipe is important. When I'm making IPA, it's the whole program evolves. So, and it will drag in single IPA, pale ale, double IPA, triple IPA. All these things are very evolving and they're always being like moved around how that singular beer is being moved around. Just because we're always learning, how do we want to rouse stuff? What kind of hops are we going to be using? What kind of bittering? Are we mash hopping? Are we not mash hopping? It's always like little trials. And every once in a while, I'm going to create some sort of consistency. I'm going to like it. And then I'm going to throw something completely off spec. Go, okay, so what does removing all the wheat off of this and just put oats going to do? Okay, it kind of makes it a little bit smoother, makes it a little bit easier to drink. Then on another time, but it'll also make it a little bit less hazy than something that contains wheat. But then again, the wheat stuff has these astringencies that kind of come in because they're a little bit thicker and they're more astringent for a period of time. Look at the beer a month in, it's not the same beer as 2 months in. It's not the same beer as what's coming out of the bright tank. So we're always kind of playing around with those things, and the overall process is really looking at the beers and going, like, what can I change to make the overall program completely track? Years ago, it was completely crazy. Every single time I made a beer, I was changing almost everything. And I kind of realized that grain bills were not as important as I thought they were. I think overall process...
Grain bills are not as important as you thought they were.
No. Like, what was kind of weird was that I would make these... I would start doing collabs with people, which would force me to do a very different grain bill. And I could not see that much of a difference between something that was like really high wheat, really high oats, really high, just really low adjuncts, had very marginal aspect on what we were brewing. The brewery, like tank dimensions, just method, just every other procedure around it was almost more important than that thing. So I still play around with tweaking those minor things to try to see if I can make it better, but I don't find that the overall grain bill is as important as it used to be. More pH levels of starter beers, pH, there's water profiles that we're going to be hitting, and just trying to see how we can increase the haze level, but also reduce astringencies and keep everything kind of balanced in the whole mix. So it's just kind of, it's a very difficult dance that we're trying to figure out. And I have like these mindsets that I have on how I should be making IPA right now, and is always looking towards the future of how it should be.
So then, and that's interesting. And I do want to talk about this kind of reducing astringency piece, but then where do you kick off? Like, you're creating a new IPA. What becomes the creative driver for that? Obviously, there's plenty of hops out there. There's new flavor ideas. As you're thinking about where to start on that, you've got your baseline process wherever it is at that given moment in time.
Yeah.
Even as it's constantly dynamically shifting. But where do you generally start in that kind of creative process? Obviously, we're not talking about a collaboration where that starts with a collaborator's ideas, but as you're thinking about new something, is it that ingredient, that hop idea that starts pushing it? Or is it a flavor idea? You're like, I wonder how we can reverse engineer something like this and do it in an IPA. Is it, just testing a certain kind of, technical parameter, and thinking about the ingredients that are going to feed into that? Talk to me about your creative process there.
I guess where I'm at with New England IPAs now is kind of just like what you like the term shaving is I'm kind of just adjusting these little
shaving. Yeah. There's a craft beer brewing podcast term right there.
Exactly. So I'm kind of like that.
Evan is smiling right now as you say that.
I'm kind of just shaving these little parameters going,
yeah, okay,
half a bag less of wheat. What does that do? Where a few years ago, it would be like, just take the whole wheat out of it. I'm kind of just adjusting these little parameters. Everything else is just, again, looking at my menu and going, what beer am I currently lacking? I'm out of 100% Citra. 100% Citra ends up being the highest seller that we have on the board all the time.
So this is a beer called 100% Citra?
No, I just mean anything. Like, we have a bunch of 100% Citra. Anything that's 100% Citra. So we remove.
So the customers know it that well.
Yeah.
That if it's all Citra, they want to drink it.
Always number one seller. So if one of our brands, we have a whole bunch of different brands that are 100% citrus. So I have a brand called Lots, which the whole idea is that it's a specific lot of Citra. Like, this one's really cool. This is called Lots of Citra something. And like right now, the beer that you're drinking right now is actually called Lots of Motueka because it's a specific, only one lot of Motueka from Freestyle. So it's just defining something, going, okay, that's that brand. So it's a lot of where I'm at now is like I adjust the baseline factors of what a New England is. I'm hitting this more or less the same points and just trying to define like very minute adjustments. But then the hop profile is really based on what the menu is actually missing, because it's not just like our beers are not cans that are just disappearing into the market, and then it doesn't matter to just make almost the same beer back to back. If I have beers that are going to be sitting on the board for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, the board beating the menu for me, those, if I'm not going to make a Citra Nelson right away if I already have a Citra Nelson on the board, because that means I can't make that beer again until that kind of goes away, because I'm not going to really have 2 beers that are Citra Nelson on it. But then I'll make a Citra Motueka. I'll then make one of my favorite mixes, which is Riwaka Rakau. I'll do these kind of things that are just trying to fill up kind of different holes inside that thing. So that's how I spend almost more on like the IPA process. It's more, what are the differences? What are the different things that I can throw on the menu that creates this nice menu? Not,
it's like an NBA rotation, right? You gotta throw in somebody to play that center position, somebody that's going to play that point guard position. Some people have to sit on the bench for a little bit, but you got to keep that rotation fresh so that people can play deep into the playoffs. Rest in peace, our Denver Nuggets, who got bumped out of our playoffs. But in that sense, you look at each of these hops almost as those position players that, where you're going to cycle a new beer into that position, as the old one, comes off off the tap list. But tell me about Riwaka Rakau. I'm curious why this one that's a favorite blend of yours.
It's strangely enough, Rakau, almost anything New Zealand's amazing. So Nelson,
anything,
almost anything. Nelson Rakau. It's really this unsung hop that's just nicely foundational to a lot of these things. Because Riwaka is different. Riwaka is one of these things that it really depends on who you're buying it from. You get these insane diesel, these insane fruities on some other people, and then these just sesame seed coriander.
Is a crazy, crazy hop, yeah. And yes, I think, anyone who's listened to our New Zealand podcast episodes about that, I learned so much about that insane hop just from being down there. Wide range, even amongst who you're buying it from, where that specific lot was from, what farm, what those conditions were. It's such a pain in the ass hop to grow. Everyone hates it. And yeah. Well, I shouldn't say everyone hates growing it. Like most growers, it poses challenges for them. But Rakau, that's an interesting counterpoint to Riwaka on this. And I did see some Rakau in some fields. I know we saw some at the Nelson Lakes farm where we were down there. What, for you, how does that one, kind of hit, and how does it work so well with Riwaka?
It just works really well as a foundational thing. It's almost like Citra works so well with so many other hops. Rakau alone is fine, but Rakau with something else from New Zealand really bumps it up. And it's almost everything I've ever done that has the Rakau foundation inside of it's really, really been good and really interesting. It's been surprising across everything, but it smells nice, and you get it on a sensory panel. It's an interesting hop, but it never gets you never realize how much it helps all the other hops kind of shine. And that's what we like that's what Citra is a big key for. That's why Citra is almost in every single one of our beers. It just makes everything a little bit better.
So when you use your cow, how do you use it? Is it a 50-50 hop? Riwaka is a really potent hop, and so matching it 50-50, it may actually kind of overpower another hop that you use it with.
I find Riwaka to be like smoked malts, where it doesn't really matter if I'm using 50-50 or using just a small percentage of it. That is the best analogy I've heard for it yet. That's fantastic. Because when we make smoke lagers, I make something that contains 5 to 10%, or I make something that contains 50 to 100%, and it's smoky, but not incredibly so. not as much as like what you would think a 50% bump up. And same thing I would say about Riwaka.
It hits your smoke threshold where that's what you perceive, and it does it at a very low threshold, and it just stays at that threshold for no matter how much more you add to it. And Riwaka is like that.
Almost everything we make Riwaka is either a third or a half of the dry hop. Very rarely do I put just a lot less than that. And I almost prefer a higher dosage because I get almost better profile, where when it's just kind of part of it, it almost overtakes everything. Where when it's more in it, then I actually get more fruits and I get more of the nice complexity that I get from Riwaka. But so something like the Riwaka Ricao blend is 50-50.
It's a bold Riwaka blend there. Sure. Are there any other hop combinations that these days you find yourself gravitating towards?
I mean, Citra Nelson's a big winner. Been slowly getting back into just Galaxy because we finally got rid of our 2021, 2022 crops, and now we're getting back into the other stuff. We're really careful about how we used Australian hops. There's few hops that are either too haze positive and too intense that we try to now use on secondary.
Too haze positive.
Because too haze positive would be too astringent. They're too pasty.
Oh, okay.
We have the Galaxy paste or like the Australian paste, but most people just call it Galaxy paste. At least that's what we call it.
Galaxy paste.
It goes quite pasty, especially the 21, 2022 stuff. And so we develop techniques here where what we do is their secondary dry hops.
Pasty in a flavor sense or pasty in a visual sense? Because when I think pasty, I think about somebody that never leaves their house and that ends up being like pasty white, and
it's kind of just like in the astringency level is too astringent.
Okay,
and they stick. Then they create this level of haze that is really nice to look at, but you look at the cup and like this is gonna hurt. And then you have a big sip and it never drops out. I've had Galaxy beers that I've thrown into my lagering tanks for 2 months to try to clear off, and it never fully cleared out. And so what we're really, really careful, and we're really fearful of the Australian stuff. And everything we do like that is a second day dry hop where we don't rouse. We throw it in at cold crash just to make sure that we get these nice flavors, but we don't do rouses and we don't kick them up, and it just gives us.
You're looking for inefficiency there.
I'm looking for inefficiency.
Yeah.
Where almost everything else is just our typical dry hop technique is we just send everything down to about 13 degrees, dry hop as a single charge, bump it up the next day, pretty much cold crash after that point. So super simple, 24-hour contact time. And everything works that way. And then I pull stuff out of that, which is Australian stuff and Mosaic. Because Mosaic, for some reason, seems to be haze negative. And those are kind of the only two that get added into the next day. And Mosaic will be bumped. That's the only one that's allowed to be roused. Everything else, that's the Australian stuff, not allowed to be roused. Has to just like kind of look at the beer. Just kind of settle itself way. And it's not as bad this year. I made 100% Galaxy and it turned out to be pretty good. And they've done efforts in their side to make something interesting because I'm looking for more hops to use. Because that's where a lot of the things like lots of Motueka, just like the definition of our series called lots, which is going, that's like one singular hop can be a lot of things. What a Citra can be so many different Citras, Motueka, Nelson could be a lot of different things. Who's growing it? What soil base? The terroir really is so massively important. And with time, I'm just kind of hitting a point where I really like 8 to 10 hops. And I just don't want the board to say Citra Nelson all the time, but I love that combination.
Sure.
But I love what if Citra from Jackson hops with Edgar's Nelson is a good option, or a Garston or a Edgar's, doesn't really matter. And you throw these names on to try to create this concept of, hey, these are massively different like agricultural products. And that's a lot of what we've been trying to push in these recent years of just going, these are the hops that we want to use, but it shouldn't just be identified as a singular like strain of hops. It should be identified as like, this is where it's coming from. And these people are doing great work and they're doing something completely different. And they themselves are deciding, this is what we want our stuff to smell like. So then we grab it and like, hey, this is what our stuff smells like because of these people.
How much, what is that range from, an Eggers Nelson versus a Garston Nelson? And, that Eggers farm in Upper Motory, I drove past it a few months ago. Like I've seen the terroir. I know the clay soil that they grow on, and the Garston terroir is quite a bit different down there in Queenstown and its surrounds, and kind of an extreme terroir. From your perspective, like what would be the difference in a Nelson for those two?
It's crazy, the difference. What's weird about Garston is the only one that I find if I do a hop rub, it's okay. But then the beer is incredible when it comes out of it. It's almost like there's a lot. I guess there must be a lot of sulfur compounds or something inside where the initial rub, you're like, this is okay. And then even the beer has the same thing where I only transfer it to bright, and only in bright I go, oh my God, how fruity is this beer? And then you have stuff like Eggers, which are really pushing this massive kind of diesel intensity kind of thing, kind of freestyle, a little bit more intense though. So it's all these things that they're pushing in those different aspects. So they're choosing to go pushing a lot of these crops a little bit later, have a little bit more dankness, have a little bit more intensity. Obviously things like Garston, they're growing in clay, so they're a little bit more different in those senses. So it's really, really different, and that's what's nice. But even now, like right now, in my cold room, I haven't done my hop selection, but I have from Eggers hops, maybe 3 or 4 Nelsons. Same thing from Freestyle, 3 or 4 Nelsons I have to decide from. So even within these individual growers, they're going to have these individual plots and these individual crops that are so different from themselves. And we have a hard time. Sometimes it's super easy. You rub something like, wow,
sure.
This is what we want. And sometimes we rub it and like, oh boy, which one should we be taking? And like, we'll do dry hop tests on some of these and just see if we can figure it out. But that's what's lovely about these products is
dry hop tests. Tell me about your process for that.
So a lot of what we do, we used to run so many bottle tests.
You do dry hop tests with your hop selection samples.
But when we get a hop selection,
that's nerdy.
Yeah. Because they'll send you more or less an ounce. So they'll send you like at 28 grams. Our general dry hop's about 4 to 5 pounds per barrel. That's about 18 grams. The advantage that we get is like we can rub a few hops and smell them, and we're unsure. Then we could take sometimes we'll have 5 to 6 hops, and we're not sure about if this one or this one's the better option. We'll just grab a fermenter that's just going, that's just about at the dry hop stage. We'll fill up a liter and put more or less 5 pound per barrel dry hop inside of it. And then we'll smell it the next day. And that might change our choice about which was the dry hop, the actual hop pellets that we wanted to have. Because sometimes it's like, this one smells really good, but what is it actually doing in beer? We don't know what it's doing in beer until we kind of do the little dry hop test. We can almost do that thing in 4 hours, because just like shaking the bottle and filtering it out, it's almost better in 4 hours because it kind of eliminates any kind of potential oxidation properties that you would have over the course of a 24-hour period. But it allows us to get like a fairly decent, interesting result in a very quick time.
Of those characters, what do you find yourself leaning towards? And have you learned through that testing process how to better tune your rub, to what actually shows up in the beer in those characters? You can then start to mentally adjust your own sensory, approach to this and tune into those kinds of notes.
In many ways, yeah. I think the most important thing that there is about doing rubs is not trying to be interesting.
Really?
is because it's because like right now, recently I did a rub 3 weeks ago for a New Zealand from Yakima Chief, and there was 4 hops on the table for Nelson. One of them was amazing, but it wasn't Nelson. At least for what I would determine as being Nelson. But thinking about what my brand of lots of Nelson is, I just took a picture of the lot saying, can I get 1 box of this or 2 boxes of this so I can do this? I want to make this singular beer for this thing, but it's not Nelson because it's so out of spec from what I'm considering it as being Nelson. And that's what's massively interesting about the hop world, is that these things will pull out a spec, and then we're trying to figure out, okay, this is actually a really nice smelling one, but it shouldn't be the foundation of what we consider as Nelson because it's so out of spec. And like we're getting more tuned into that, and I'm getting a lot less interested with crazy things. I do see the interest, and I like using them, but they're not the ones that we found actually doing. And because like one of the major things that we actually do here is that I on average have 3 to 5 different lots of every hop that we use, and I blend according to flavor. So if I'm going to be doing Citra Nelson, I'm like, okay, what do I want this thing to be? I want the Citra kind of foundation to be more fruity. Then I'm going to take my fruity Citra. And I want the Nelson component to be more diesel-y. Okay, I'm going to use this diesel Citra, and then we're going to find a way to tune it into a thing that makes the most amount of sense for us. I'm not a huge fan of having singular hop lots anymore. I like having this range of hops that allows me to kind of blend stuff in like it's spices. But just having, so like overall reducing the amount of varieties I have, but more like having a little bit less varieties, but more range within that same variety. So I could play around with those little levers at that point.
I am fascinated by this, and I could probably talk about this forever. But we've been talking for a while now, and we are not going to have time to talk about things like warm 3470 fermentation and some of the other experimentation and stuff that we've tasted, or the Phantasm beer that tastes like passion fruit, because we are just running up against time on this. But Derrick, as we zoom out and kind of think about big picture, you've been at this for a number of years. Obviously, experimentation is at the core. We've heard how you've developed really finely tuned ways to think about variations within even the same ingredient, within the same hop, finding different aspects of flavor and avenue and ways to help that express here. As you think about the next couple of years, what's your, what are you looking forward to here at BreWskey? What, experimentation is constant. It's not as if there's some project you're going to tackle. You're tackling projects every day, all the time, testing everything, and reacting to and adding to this kind of list of learning as you go. What are you excited about tackling as we go forward here in the future? And what do the next few years hold for BreWskey?
I think a lot of what I'm interested in moving, like just in terms of brewing, is kind of a whole bunch of new crazy things. Because in the last few years, I've been kind of stuck building. I've been building a lot of the stuff. I'm the one who builds the new spaces. And it's kind of been a year that there's been a little bit of a slowdown in the building process. And I've been able to concentrate on more of the beer, not just having it being, in some ways, a second
refinement
thought.
Rather than expansion.
Exactly. But more, not just refinement, just like having my creative juices, not just thinking about how I should have tank placement and how to run this pipe and doing that stuff and going, hey, should I be doing a fonio beer? Should I be doing a, this just whatever beer that kind of comes up? So a lot of what I'm looking forward to is that now we kind of have a capacity of brewing beer that that is kind of sustainable. We have a demand of beer that also allows us to have everything kind of flowing out of here. So now I could become creative again, even though I've been creative for the last years. It hasn't been as easy to be creative, more about just trying to survive and get the beer products out. And a lot of things, like that's where podcasts like what you're doing and just the magazine that you're doing allows us to just have like these quick glimpses of, hey, this is an interesting idea. And just my pilot system goes, hey, here's a new recipe that Crab Beer and Brewing just did. I'll just copy paste the recipe. Just go, let's see what this is. And because then we get to try something that we'd have a hard time trying, and it might create this idea of, hey, maybe we should do this thing. I'm looking more into getting back into the art of brewing more than the general production. The production side, we kind of have it covered now. And we don't have ideas of necessarily growing much more than we are right now. It's more about how can I make a 30 tap list be massively interesting and keep it rotating and go back to what I love the most, which was homebrewing.
That's beautiful, and that's a great place to bring this to a close. G&D Chillers engineering crew have been piping breweries, wineries, and distilleries for more than 30 years. Berkeley Yeast bioengineers ordinary strains to make them extraordinary. Old Orchard formulates custom blends featuring specialty ingredients. Indie Hops Lorien combines traditional elements of noble hops with an elegant twang of modernity. Discover how steel chill cups can put your brand on every pour at steelchillcups.com. Arrived as your one-stop brewery operating system, PackTech is trusted by craft brewers nationwide for their smarter, sustainable way to carry your beer. And the Brewery Workshop will help prepare you for the challenges of brewery operation. If you've enjoyed this episode, go to beerandbrewing.com, click that subscribe button, become a subscriber like Derrick and the team here at BreWskey. And, help us bring you conversations like this and also every issue of the magazine, both of our magazines, Brewing Industry Guide and Craft Beer and Brewing. Derrick, if people want to learn more about BreWskey here in the old city of Montreal, where can they find you, both out there in virtual space and here in real life?
We're in BreWskey Market in Old Montreal. We're literally right in front of the Ferris wheel, so it's the easiest way to kind of find us. Apart from that, brewski.ca, Pub BreWskey on Instagram and Facebook, so kind of easy to find us.
I have personally really enjoyed the beers you've sent our way. It's wonderful to see this place in operation. The work you're doing is fantastic. Keep doing it, and thanks for sharing all your thoughts and opinions with our audience. Cheers.
Thanks, Jamie.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.